President Frank and Rotarians and guests, it's indeed my pleasure today to introduce our guest speaker, past President Ray Clark. Many of the older members of our club are very much aware of Ray and know him, and recognise that he was a past president of our club in 2001, 2002, having a very good year, and in the 6 or 7 years since then, Ray has been very busy with the Masonic, his Masonic activities. 3 years leading up to being the Grand Master, and 3 years of Grand Master, and of course some duties since that time. But so he's been a very busy man. He and his wife Paula, who's with us today also, they live down at Cape Jervis. I think he's self-elected mayor down at Cape Jervis these days, and he's got quite a few activities happening down there, but I'm not going to steal his thunder, and I'd like, Ray, if you'd come forward, we'd look forward to what you're going to say to us this afternoon. Thank you.
President Frank, fellow Rotarians, good afternoon. Firstly, to past President Brett, thank you for the introduction this afternoon, and to past President Ivan Morris, thank you for the invitation to me to address the meeting today. When I spoke to Ivan, he thought it might be a good idea for me to let the club know what I've been doing over the last few years, and in particular relating to my time as the Grand Master of Freemasons in South Australia and the Northern Territory, and a few other things that I'm doing. So I thought I'd start off by giving you a brief summary of my personal life today. As Brett mentioned, my personal life is spent at Cape Jervis on the Fleurieu Peninsula. Paul and I have owned a property there for about 25 years, and a few years ago, much to Paula's disbelief, we decided to live there permanently. This for me was to be idyllic, with the aim of fishing from my boat 1 or 2 days a week, a bit of gardening and a bit of golf. However, this hasn't quite eventuated quite the way that I planned. And in fact, my boat hasn't been wet for a few months. Actually, that's not quite true. Last week it got wet because I washed it. I now find that I'm growing hay on our farmland and selling most of that, producing about 1,000 fat lambs each year for Woolworths, selling the wool from our shearing clip, and then in addition to the farming aspects, we've got a B&B operating in the old farmhouse, and also we've got a set of holiday units which have about 75 people through each week. So instead of relaxing, fishing, etc., I'm either mustering or dagging sheep, driving the tractor, or I have my head stuck down a toilet cleaning rooms. When I am required to come to town to attend board meetings, etc., I feel a little bit like Eddie Albert from Green Acres, the television show, is invariably, when I'm ready to leave, I often find that I have to do a last minute chore like shift the tractor or something with my suit on. We find the days come and go at an astonishing pace, and it seems like every second day is a Monday. But we do enjoy it. We enjoy it when friends come to stay for a day or two or attend one of our parties where they may meet the joy of their life. As Brett did. Now I'll expand on my time as the 32nd Grand Master of the Freemasons in South Australia and the Northern Territory. The appointment was for a 3-year term from 2009 to 2012, with the years 2006 to 2009 served as a deputy, so in fact it's been a total of a 6-year commitment. This for me was a great honour, particularly when I look back and see in history that many of our previous state governors and many of our community leaders have previously held this role. There are 6 serving Grand Masters in Australia and many throughout the world. In England, for example, the Duke of Kent is the Grand Master there, and we had the privilege to spend some time with him during his visit to Adelaide a few years ago. The role of Grand Master is to preside over 110 active lodges and to ensure that the principles of our fraternity are maintained and that our charitable efforts continue to demonstrate our relativity in society. In South Australia, apart from our Grand Lodge building on North Terrace and our metropolitan country lodges, we have exposure to the community through the Masonic homes, who have extensive retirement villages in Adelaide and Darwin, and further exposure through the Freemasons Foundation, which is the charitable arm of Freemasonry and which runs a men's health research program in partnership with the University of Adelaide. It is necessary for the Grand Master to visit each lodge in South Australia and the Northern Territory, and also to represent our jurisdiction in interstate and overseas visits. During my time as Grand Master, I visited each lodge in South Australia and the Northern Territory, and sometimes more than once, and also travelled to each Australian state twice, together with 3 visits to New Zealand and a 3-week visit to Italy. In Freemasonry, discussion about politics and religion is frowned upon at our meetings. And though there are many myths regarding this matter, to join Freemasonry is necessary for an individual to have some belief. But this can vary with each member. We have Christians, Muslims, Sikhs and other denominations represented in our membership. And whilst in Italy it was interesting to note that there's always been a myth that the Freemasons and the Catholics were opposed to each other. This is only a myth. And I mentioned earlier that during my term I visited Italy, and this country has the greatest number of Freemasons lodges per head of population. There are 660 lodges there, and to dispel that myth, they're almost entirely made up of Catholics. The tour group had a wonderful time. We were exposed to some fantastic Italian hospitality, which caused us to eat huge meals well into the night. Back to South Australia, the first Freemasons lodge in South Australia was formed 2 years before the state was settled. The South Australian Company, which was formed in England in about 1830, had the objective to set up the first free colony in the New World. And many of the directors in this company were Freemasons. And many in the streets in Adelaide are named after those members. These Freemasons met in England in 1832, and prior to sailing to the new colony, they formed a new lodge called the Lodge of Friendship. And this lodge commenced meetings in South Australia in 1834, and this lodge is still operating today and meets each month on North Terrace. Now, at least 1 and possibly 2 Rotarians from this club are active members of that particular lodge, which is said to be one of, if not the oldest legal entity in South Australia. One of our other lodges boasts that over its lifetime, the lodge has had 5 governors of South Australia, 3 lieutenant governors, 22 judges of the Supreme Court, and 23 members of Parliament, and 32 Knights of the Realm included in its membership list. In 1834, as South Australia developed, so did the growth of Freemasons lodges grow. When I look at the Masonic records and see the start date of lodges in Adelaide and country towns, it almost gives you a history of how our state developed. Lodges soon started in Port Adelaide, Clare, Burra, Kapunda, Moonta, etc. And even in the last few years, Roxby Downs, etc. They all have Masonic lodges. But by the 1970s, there were about 150 active lodges operating throughout South Australia and Northern Territory, and there were about 30,000 members. And since 1834, there's been a total of 250 lodges start in districts and country towns. And some of these have since closed or amalgamated. And during this time, and from about the 3rd decade of the last century, the Rotary Club of Adelaide has a long association with Freemasonry. And for many years, the weekly Rotary meetings were held in the North Terrace Freemasons Hall. There have been, over the Rotary Club's history, and still are, many active Freemasons who are members of both organisations. In the 1980s, and as the railways ceased in towns and populations diminished, so did the number of lodges reduced. We found during the 1980s and the 1990s a similar trend starting to occur to that which was occurring in churches, community clubs like Apex, Lions and Rotary. All organisations were finding that a lot of the baby boomer generation did not want to be tied to the commitments associated with involvements of a service or community type organisation. There were lots of changes occurring in the community for us to compete with and to distract potential members. Things like 7 days a week, 24 hours a day hotel trade, poker machines, modernisation of sporting events like AFL and worldwide cricket were being televised several days and nights a week. Individuals were working longer and were time bankrupt. People changed jobs more often than the previous generation, and there was a distinct change in attitude. Freemasonry had to change in their thinking in relation to acquiring and sourcing members in order that it remain relevant and in fact continue to exist. Some other organisations have failed to recognise the necessity for change. As an example, look at Apex. About 30 to 40 years ago, Apex was a vibrant organisation and all suburbs and country towns had an Apex club. You can still see many plaques and community signs which acknowledge the great work that Apex did. Then this change of attitude in some of the baby boomers began to sweep the nation. In Apex at age 40, you were required to resign, so gradually the heart and soul of Apex compulsory left and weren't being replaced. Today, Australia-wide, Apex has only a handful of clubs left and a minimal membership which is still diminishing. It could be said that the service clubs, community clubs and churches have had our own form of having a lost generation. In the last few years, in Freemasonry, we've had a trend change and we now see a lot of the younger generation joining. A lot of these remember that their grandfather or uncle were Freemasons and they have inquired on our website. And since Freemasonry has modernised its website and provided an online application form, there's been a great increase in our membership inquiries. And I noticed that the Rotary Club of Adelaide has done likewise in recent times. In Freemasonry, once an inquiry is made online, we have a policy that that person has to be replied to and contacted within 24 hours. We did a lot of research on the younger generation, the Gen Ys, and our research showed that the younger generations were impatient, they wanted answers immediately. I remember the good old days in business when if you received a letter from someone through the mail, it stayed in your in-basket for a couple of days and you looked at it a few times and then you wrote back acknowledging you received the letter and you get back to them in the near future and you was able to buy a few weeks and you get a letter back from your client or the person that wrote to you and the process went on without pressure. Then emails come along and in the beginning it was a very slow response. Now if you send an email, you know that it not only goes to the recipient's computer, but it goes to their iPhone as well. And you sit there looking at your terminal waiting for an immediate response. If after 3 minutes you haven't got a reply, you send another one and say, did you get my email? The young ones are very impatient. They want it now and they want to be district governor in 2 years or Grand Master in 3 years. They're craving for knowledge. And with the research that we see, that the young ones research out any organisation before joining. In fact, before they make contact, they generally know more about that organisation before joining than some of the older members do. All their younger members communicate via Facebook. They arrange all their meetings, etc., by text or Facebook. And to them, if you communicate by emails, it's very old-fashioned. I recall holding a meeting and I was calling for 6 volunteers to do something. And I recall that the meeting went on for a little while and this young person at the meeting interrupted and said, I've got the 6 volunteers, I've sent a message out and I've heard their names. And we were still sitting there talking about the old-fashioned way of what to put in the notice to send out to people who ask for volunteers. We do find the younger members are very generous. They want to be associated with our charitable work and they want to abide by our principles. They've got their own ideas and what we need to do is listen to them. The young Freemasons have set up their own association and they've actually got their own lodge going. And I look at the new methodology in applying for membership in both Rotary and Freemasonry and I reflect back on when I joined both of those organisations. With Rotary I recall Brian Cole, who incidentally was a great Freemason and a great Rotarian. And I think he was accompanied by Langdon Parsons. They made an appointment with my personal assistant Joy to see me and they came into my office and spent 45 minutes explaining that I had been identified as a potential member of the Rotary Club of Adelaide. They explained to me the principles and ideals of Rotary and they left me with a card to fill out and to advise the club that I was either interested or not interested in furthering my application. And this card had to be returned to Judy Smith, who was then the full-time secretary. I was invited to attend a few meetings as a guest of Brian Cole. I was put through an interrogation by John Flavel, who was keen to sort out some sort of fitting classification, probably as an additional active, whatever that meant. The process to join Freemasonry is very similar, with the need for someone who's known you or knows you for many years to propose you as a potential member. And each of them had to vouch for you. as to your suitability and to your character. And I was lucky because I've been a member of Freemason now for over 40 years, and my father proposed me. But today, with the online and streamlined membership application, both within Freemason and Rotary, whilst it is good and simple and can be very beneficial to our membership drives, I believe we need to be very cautious about maintaining our principles. In the past, merely the process itself for new members vetted and qualified all joining people. But today, we've got to be, whilst we can all be very enthusiastic about trying to get new members, we've got to be very careful we do not allow very unsuitable members to join. With advertising and what I call cold, unqualified inquiries, it could be quite damaging to our reputations and our integrity if we allowed for an individual to join who either had a criminal record or was a member of an associated with an illegal gang. Since this change in Freemasonry, we now require all new applicants to be accompanied by a police check and clearance. This, to a certain extent, removes some of the risk. This process of supplying a police check is normal practice now for lots of volunteer and community groups and workers. And for those now wishing to join with nothing to hide, they see that as a very strong positive point for the organisation. Those who have a shady past never proceed with their application. So it's my hope that Rotary and Freemasonry will in the future see their memberships grow again to the levels that were applying a decade or so ago. Before I finish, I would like to comment on my association with the Royal Society for the Blind and how this has been linked to both Rotary and Freemasonry. I've been on the board at the Royal Society for the Blind for 15 years, and I've been chairman of that board for 6 years with a 1 year to go. And apart from the normal duties of the chairman and responsibilities attached to corporate governance, there's been a lot of input over the last 12 months into the interpretation and impact surrounding the rules for the forthcoming disability care legislation. During the last 2 years at the Royal Society for the Blind, we've developed a free community awareness seminar based on preventative action to avoid vision loss. This is called the My Eye Health Program. And this program advises attendees of how to minimise vision loss, how to identify problems, and what strategies to take. This is particularly helpful to have when you're caring for elderly citizens. So a partnership has been organised a few years ago between the Royal Australian College of Ophthalmologists, the Freemasons Foundation, and the Royal Society for the Blind. We've co-opted assistance in lots of areas and lots of groups in Adelaide, including the Adelaide Crows, who deliver our message to the APY lands where eye disease amongst the Aboriginal community is prevalent. This program has the support and of His Excellency Kevin Scarce, who was the patron of the program. It's been taken to all states, to all parts of South Australia and the Northern Territory. And in this process, we've involved lots of Rotary clubs and lots of Probus clubs. We've delivered this free seminar to over 10,000 attendees. So I'm very proud of the work that the Royal Society for the Blind does, and very proud of the work that Rotary does. And I'm very proud that I've been able to link those three organisations together. So President Frank, this has been what I've been doing over the last few years. So I've maintained my club membership, I've attended the past President's Dinner each year, I've attended many Rotary Club meetings in relation to the My Eye Health Program, but sadly I've not attended my own club. Perhaps within the not too distant future, and some of my time will be freed up, I may be able to attend a little bit more often. So thank you.